FNR, Football Nation Radio.
Sirianos, no call! Score!
Salamini for Cole. Cole on the run. Shoots. 2-0.
Lazanovsky with the free kick. Launches a rocket! Trimboli, what vision!
Bath blasts.
Yes! Heads it!
Miljevic.
Beautiful ball! Here's Bozanic. They might have won it!
The Pioneers with George Donikian and George Kotsanis on FNR, Football Nation Radio.
The memories keep flooding back, don't they? Our guest tonight on the Pioneers, and I've got to say good evening to George Kotsanis. How are you, my boy?
Hey Georgie, how are you, buddy?
You ready? We've got another great guest tonight. He was born in
Ready as I'll
Dundee,
ever
Scotland. I don't know where you keep finding them, but they keep coming up from Scotland.
It's my Scottish background.
Yeah. As a junior, he played for Springfield Amateurs, then Maryfield Athletic Juveniles, then the Strathmore Juveniles, and then about 1968 he decided to come down under, came to Melbourne, and within a few months he joined the Essendon Lions. I'll get that right. He did return to Scotland for a little while, but always had that urge to come back. And he came back to play for Box Hill, for Sunshine City, Frankston City, Moorabbin City, and a host of other clubs. And then he decided that coaching might be his caper. And his career started as an assistant at Frankston City, and there's a story there, I'm led to believe. Box Hill, Preston Macedonia, Thomastown, Altona Gate, George Cross, Green Gully. You might have gathered by now that this man, our special guest, has become something very special in the coaching lore in this country.
Absolutely.
He's also coached the Victorian under-16 girls, the Victorian women, and the under-19 women. And across all of these jobs, and then much later, he was involved with the Australian Soccer Federation coaching scheme. He's done it all, and among his many influences, just listen to these names. Ken Patterson, one of his great old coaches at Essendon. Hugh Sugar-Murney, again, another one of those great coaches at Essendon. Jimmy Rooney, heard of him? Jimmy Smart, the great Martin Peters, who won a World Cup with England in '66. Eamon Bannon, Len McHenry, Raul Blanco, Raleigh Russich, Jimmy Sholden, Ron Smith, and Jimmy Armstrong. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome
Bill Murray.
Bill Murray.
Thank you,
That's a fantastic one.
That is an
What a
amazing body
CV.
of work, isn't it?
I've been very blessed, George, to be able to have the experience of these people, and I'm grateful for that.
What brought you down under? Why Australia?
I
And why
went-
Melbourne?
I was going to come out to Australia 3 years before I did, but my friends all stopped coming out, and I just wanted to come here, and I deferred it. And then when Jimmy Rooney was coming out in 1968, I knew Jimmy and had played against him once, and he was a hero in Dundee. I asked him if he would help me to get out there, and he said he would. Jimmy kept his part of the bargain, and I came out here at the end of 1968.
That's amazing. And he's still a hero, Jimmy Rooney. He was a hero in Dundee, he's a hero in Melbourne, he's a hero in Sydney, he's an
A
absolute
hero in 1974 too.
He certainly
He's
was.
a champion bloke. So you came out and joined Essendon Lions.
Yes,
Yeah.
in Scotland I realised I wasn't going to make it as a professional footballer, and I loved the game so much I wanted to give it another chance.
Yeah.
And I came out to join Jimmy at Essendon Lions with the other Dundee lads there. There was Jimmy Smart, Jimmy Anderson, and Jimmy Smith, all Jimmys.
Yeah.
And I joined the club, and they had some great players there. They had Bobby Evans in goal, who played for Everton. They had Tommy Roseweir, who played for Queen's Park in Scotland and almost played for Australia. Steve Walker, who became captain of Hellas in Victoria.
Yeah.
Jerry Money, who played for, I think it was Apia in Sydney, I'm not sure, but he was transferred to Apia. And the left back position had players competing like Wally Kulak, who ended up being a great player for Croatia.
He did, yeah.
And you had John Riley and a great defender, Frank Schwartz, an Austrian boy. And I was competing with them for that one position because the other three positions were solid. You weren't going to get in the team, and I had to fight for that.
Took you a while to get in that team.
It took me a year,
Yeah.
but I was determined. And when we went out in the training park, I'd have a go at Jimmy Rooney about getting in the team, and he'd just say, "Just play better." And what he would then do was nutmeg me on the park, and he kept on doing it until I did it back. And I learned one thing: when players test you like that, they want you to react.
Yeah.
And Jimmy taught me how to nutmeg people, and I'm grateful for that.
Very good.
The season went through, and the first inkling I got that I had some consideration, I was chosen to play in a friendly game in Canberra. And after that, at the end of the season, I was chosen again to play in a cup at Mooralbach. And we played through and won the cup. And the following that following Friday, I was named in the squad for the game. I didn't know if I was going to be playing. No, nothing was said to me. I was just named in the squad. And on Sunday morning, before we went out, Jimmy Rooney was our leader, but Jimmy Smart mentored me a great deal. And as we were walking out the door, he said, "Willie," he said, "you've got to understand, if you're playing today," he said, "they're going to come right after you." He says, "You'll have to fight for that position." He says, "So when you go in that park, you make sure that that you get that first tackle in. You have to do this." And as soon as he said that, I knew it was playing. And everything changed right there and then, and I was wobbly. So we went to the game, and we lined up for the photographs. I was standing next to Jerry Money, and all the Scots boys in the stand started chanting my name. So that made me worse. I was beside myself. So the game started, and it took about 1 minute before the ball was played out to Ronnie Frost, my opponent, at the halfway line. And we were just it wasn't like the game's played now with the pressing. It was him against me, and Ronnie made a little move, and I was a right back, but I was playing left back, and I went to the tackle, and he beat me all ends up. And the ball was going out to the sideline. But I think God must have been on my side, because I just touched his toe. And as the ball went, I went to ground, and I got up quickly, and he made the biggest mistake of his life, because he caught the ball on the line and straightened. And as he straightened, I hit him in the ball, and he landed on the running track. And there was a bit of a roar went up from the Italians in the crowd. He got up and said something that I can't tell you, and I said something that I can't tell you. And we started to play. Within a minute, the ball was played back to him. He had his back to me, and I put my leg between his to get the ball before him, and I lifted him off the ground. It didn't hurt him, but he went down, and this time it was a full-blooded roar from the crowd. Jack Riley abused me, and the referee came up and said, "One more and you're off." So within a minute, the ball came back again, and this time I was right beside him, and I won the ball off him, and Jimmy Smart called to me, "Willie, give me the ball." And I gave him the ball. He says, "Now take it back." And we went up the park passing, and Jimmy tried to beat someone, and he lost it, and I chipped the ball in, and we almost scored. In the first 3 minutes of the game, I'd won my battle. And at the end of the game, I played the game of my life. Ronnie Frost came up to me and said, "Well played, son." He says, "I only wish I'd made it a harder game for you." We lost the game 1-0. Tommy McCall came up to me afterwards and said, "You played a great game." And Jimmy Rooney said to me, "Listen, you're a bit quiet." I said, "Well, I've got to work in the morning." He says, "Willie," he says, "you take the bouquets, because the brickbats are going to come thick and fast." And Jimmy was absolutely right. And that was the start of my career with Essendon Lions.
That is an amazing recollection of someone's first game. I felt like I was in the crowd and watching.
But it also goes to the very fact of how much it meant to him.
Oh,
It
absolutely.
to be there, to actually get tested, and of course in that cauldron, to rise to the challenge and win. That's fantastic.
I realised from what Jimmy had told me that you had to deserve your place on the park. They didn't want you there if you were weaker. They would try to get you off the park, because you don't deserve to be there. That's lesson number one I learned about football, and I'm grateful for that.
You've watched some fantastic football over the years, some great memories. Amongst them, watching the Frankston City team play with Martin Peters, Eamon Bannon, and his brothers Vince and Jed, as well as Tony Young, the ex-Manchester United player.
They were all wonderful players.
What a thrill.
It was absolutely magnificent. And I was assistant coach to Freddie Bunce. Freddie was a great coach and a great player. Freddie had great skills. So I had to take the warm-up as Martin Peters come out. And I thought to myself, I am not going to just go out there and lead this. So I said, "Martin, would you like to take this and show us some of your things?" And he said, "No, Billy," says, "you're in charge, you do it." And that settled me right down. Through that time with Martin Peters there, it was a joy. A 35-year-old player who was so far above the level, it was hard to explain.
A World Cup winner.
He was a World Cup winner. He was a great man, and he was a gentleman with it. And I'd like to tell you a story. I used to come down to training with Danny McCluskey and Vincent Jed and Eamon Bannon sometimes, and sometimes I'd come out on my own. And Freddie once said, Willie, I want you to take the team on Saturday and do an offsides. I mean, what the worst thing you could do on a Saturday training was to do an offsides. I mean, it should have been through the week. But anyway, I was dying to do it, so I did it, and I got out there early, and Martin Peters was there. We were the only two there. And as we got to the start of the training, everybody was there except the Barons and McCluskey. So when they arrived, late, 15 minutes late, they've come out as I was just about to start the game, and I said, better warm yourselves up, but you're getting fined. And they said, it was a Saturday morning for a light session. They said, what for? I said, you're late again, you're fined. So that didn't go down too well, I can tell you. So at the end of the session, Martin Peters came up to me, he says, Bill, he says, look, he says, you're right. He says, everything you've done is what should be done professionally. He said, but they are part-timers. They're only earning so much from these games. He says, can you be a bit more lenient? I said, Martin, they're not like you. They need to learn, and I'm not going to let it go. So as we went in, the club they got me in and said, look, why are you pushing this? I said, because I want to push it. I want to get this across. And they said, okay, we'll find them. And it was only months later I found out that it was the best kept secret. No one told me they didn't pay the fine. And we had a good laugh about it at the end.
Well, the Bannons are Victorian soccer royalty, so I guess they made a lot of their own rules as they went on.
Oh, they certainly did. But they were all great players and great guys as well. Every one of them was a joy to work with. Every single one of them.
I bet they were.
Well, I bet you don't gain promotion, you don't win unless you try and you lift your standards. You were part of that promotion to the State League with Box Hill back in '82.
Yes.
That must have been a wonderful achievement.
Yes, well, what happened there, Lenny McKenna, I'll just go back a little bit. When I took my first badges with Jimmy Shoulder, Ernie Merrick actually got me involved. He says,
Young Ernie Merrick.
Yes, we played together at Frankson, and he said, look, you should take a coaching course. So I did, and my first session, Jimmy Shoulder said to me, to the crowd, there's your coach. Towards the end of that week, Ronnie Smith had taken me in the last session. It was Saturday night at 6 o'clock, and it was absolutely boiling. And the boys were struggling, and I got stuck into someone. And Ronnie sort of gave me a bit of a not good thing for that. And he actually said I hadn't got through the course, and I appealed it because I knew I'd done well, and I got through, but I wasn't happy with it. So when Lenny McHenry took over the next year, I said to him, I'd like to do the course again. He said, okay. So I paid it again, and I did it under his tutelage, and he says, you're in, you're doing really well. So after that, I'd had the job at Frankson, and Len phoned me up and said, I've recommended you to Box Hill. And I got the job, and getting the job at Box Hill, I have to thank Wally Patterson, Scott Patterson's dad, Craig White's dad, Tommy, Ian Roodhouse and Alan Roodhouse's dad, Mike, and Craig Davison's dad, Mike, for what they had done. They had brought through a group of young players who were absolutely fantastic players. And I was the beneficiary of that team. And with the older players like Donnie Brownlee there, we had a team that in 3 years developed so well that they made it to the State League. They were all 16, 17. In the first game we played competitively, Croydon had been third in the State League the year before, and we played and knocked them out of the cup with 6, 16, 17-year-olds in the team. They were that good. Scott Patterson ended up being called into the Australian squad, so did Mike Valentine. Pedro Ramos played for Victoria. They were wonderful.
Really was a golden era.
It was a
era,
golden
wasn't
era.
it, for Box Hill? Yeah.
Speaking of golden eras and golden players, Billy Wojtek, Jimmy Armstrong in full flight. What were they like?
Although I'm a defender, my heroes were always the forwards.
Not the wingers.
Well, especially the wingers. But Jimmy Armstrong had
Thanks,
such
Bill.
a flair and a presence. To play against him, he was just a wonderful player to watch. And I loved Jimmy playing, and everything he did I liked. And when we played in the Legends game, Jimmy actually did a shimmy once and sent 3 players the wrong way. I can still remember it. But I have to say that the player I least liked playing against and the player I most admired was Billy Wojtek. Croatia had Billy Wojtek and Billy McIntyre, both driving players who were fast. Billy
That's
McIntyre was a
instinctive,
great
huh?
player, but Billy Wojtek, all he knew was to get the ball and go at you. And he could run you, and he could change his pace, and he could change his direction so quickly, and he was always going for the box, and he never stopped. And if he got on top of you, he would just tear you to pieces.
Long afternoon.
Oh, it was one of those. He was a dreadful player to play against, but he was one of the players I admired most. He deserved his place in Australian history.
Johnny Anderson, Branko Buljevic. Tell us about some of those great characters.
Well,
The names that we don't readily see and hear these days in the A-League, of course. But there's been a tremendous history of magnificent footballers before that.
Yeah, Hughie Money, he used to play me to my limitations, and Hughie often put me in a marking position, and I had to mark people like Johnny and the JBST midfielder, and just
Frankie
Micha.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
they were hard to play against because the way they played, the team played, they always got the ball with space, and if you went near them, they passed it, and they'd lose you and get into a position to hurt players. And Branko Buljevic was also a great player for playing the ball and getting into a position where he could score goals against you. And they were nightmares to play against. They really were, because they were such good players and leaders. And I used to say to Shuggy, please, Shug, don't ask me to mark these guys at the game. And he put me against Jimmy Mackay one day, and we were doing really well. He had me back at the Croatian penalty box, and he was saying, well, are you enjoying this? I said, no, I hate it. but I had to mark him out of the game, and anyway, in that game, the ball went to our goalkeeper, Bobby Evans, with about 10 minutes to go. And I turned to go back, and I just heard the roar, and somehow the ball had been played out to Jimmy Mackay, and he scored. And Hughie Money tore strips off me in the dressing room for letting him score. And it wasn't my fault.
You didn't even see it happen.
I didn't even see it happen. So they were great players, and they were very challenging to play against. But I'm grateful that I got the chance to do that.
You've talked about some great spellbinders, though, haven't you?
Oh.
Yeah. We'll hear some more.
Okay. Well, you've told us about the opponents, the magical opponents. Tell us about some of the great players you played with. Obviously, Jimmy Rooney you mentioned, but at Essendon Lions, with Ian McCarthy.
Ian McCarthy was a wonderful midfielder. He played for Aberdeen. Stevie Walker, Jerry Money, they were just fantastic defenders. To play in that back line with both of them and Tommy Roseweir was a joy. It was something I'll never forget to the day I die.
Yeah.
To have Jimmy Rooney in the midfield, Jimmy Smart, and the way they played, and Ian McCarthy, all in the one team. Great footballers, every one of them. And we were actually sixth in the league that year the year before. Unfortunately for me, Essendon Lions sold Jimmy, Steve, Jerry, Jimmy Smart. Colin Horner went back to play in the English second and third division. And they lost all of those players at once.
Jimmy Rooney went to Sydney, I think.
Jimmy went up and played for Prague.
Yeah.
Jerry went up, and I can't remember who he played for, but Jimmy Smart played for Juventus. Steve went to Hellas. They all went to the very best teams, and they just ripped the heart out of Lions. We did get three great older players. Hughie Money. Hughie was still a really good player and leader. Joe Keenan was a very good player, but Joe was just at the cusp of, he was past his best. He still scored some goals.
Yeah.
And Tommy Robertson, who played for Rangers and Dundee, who was a magnificent player. But that was a really sad event. Tommy only played 3 or 4 games for us. He had to come off every time. And the last game he played, he was getting fitter all the time. He played against Hellas. And we were beating them 2-0 at Middle Park. And at half-time, we were leading 2-1. He come off and he said, that's it, I'm finished. He says, I can't go on. And he retired right there and then in the dressing room at half-time.
Oh, really?
And it was such a blow to the team. And it really hurt us badly. We lost the game. And Tommy was finished. And at the end of that year, Hugh left. And we just ripped the guts out of the team. All the players who really could lead the team were gone. And Essendon had some problems, Essendon Lions, and the team just struggled on after that. And I went to Box Hill. Box Hill, I'd like to talk a little bit about players I played against. There was a boy called Colin Alexander there, and I was playing directly against him. I was doing my defensive duties, but the ball got played to him.
Who was he playing for?
He was playing for Ringwood Wilhelmina, and they were a wonderful team.
Absolutely.
And as I did my job to close him, and I just heard the click, and I knew that ball was going in the net. I didn't see it. I just heard the click, and as I turned, it was in the corner. And the next thing I saw in that game was later in the game, a ball got played through to a young Gary Cole, and I was looking at his back, and Jimmy Coles, who was a defender that I really admired, Jimmy was in front of him, and all you could see, it was like slow motion. Gary just went past the whole defence on a through ball, and they couldn't stop him. And Gary scored. We lost the game 4-0. Gary Cole scored 2 of the goals in that game, and I'd never seen a player move so fast in my whole life. He was that fast at 16-year-old. He was obviously going to be a great player, and they were great players to play with and I'd play against. The other players that I played well with, I really enjoyed playing with Box Hill, but Jimmy Coles was one of my favourite players. When I went down to Frankston, we had Ernie Merrick and there's a story here as well, but we had Bobby Adams and Davy High in the centre of defence, and they were terrific players. And when I went there, I didn't get a game straight away, but in the 6 games I played, at the end of the season, we lost 1 game, and in the following year when John Pride came in, we won 4 or 5 in a row. My win ratio at Frankston is very high, but I have a story there if you'd like to hear it.
Yeah. Well, what we'll do is we'll certainly hear it. We'll take a break.
Take a break, and we'll get back with that story.
This is the Pioneers on FNR.
Am I doing okay?
Welcome back to the Pioneers. You're on Football Nation Radio. George and George with our special guest Bill Murray. Bill, you're about to tell us about your story, Frankston, Ernie Merrick. The stage is yours, my friend.
Well, in the second season, John Pride had taken over as coach, and my studies were beginning to bite. I was studying at Swinburne, my engineering diploma at that time, and my company had given me day release, but now I had to do it all at night. And I couldn't train as regularly. I could train 1 night a week. And John Pride, our new coach, who was a good player and coach, said, "Willie, I want you in the squad, but I can't guarantee you games with this sort of training regime." I said, "That's okay." So he didn't play me in the first 3 games. They lost the first 3 games. He then said to me, "I want to put you in the team because I know you'll give me 100%. And we hit a run of wins. We won 3 or 4 in a row, and I scored a goal against St Albans in that run. And the game after that, we were playing at Green Gully. And there'd been an incident between Ernie Merrick and one of their players who will remain nameless. In the game before, there was a lot of bad blood, and at Gully it was being stirred up again. And to be honest with you, Ernie Merrick did something which, if he'd been spotted, he would have got 6 weeks.
No VAR.
I can only tell you that. And of course, that was it had been stirring during the game, but that was the touch paper.
Yeah.
The game just ignited, and it was just the referee had no control of it. He couldn't. And at half time, it boiled over, and there was all sorts of incidents went on. And we got into the dressing room. We couldn't get out. The game was abandoned. And on Monday, Ernie Merrick had a full-page picture in the Age concerning what had happened to him. And the weekend after, we'd signed Sandy Irvine from Juventus, and John said, "Look, I'm going to have to put you back out because," he said, "the training is still a problem." And he said, "We've got Sandy." So I said, "That's okay, I'll do my bit for the team," and which I did. But my win record at Frankston is quite amazing. And to play with guys like Davy High and Bobby Adams, and great players in the role, Billy Buchanan, they were all wonderful players. And I had a great time playing for them. Big Norrie Campbell, wonderful.
You found yourself at Sunshine City in the First Division, and you were there in the year they got promotion to the State League, is that right?
That's right.
Yeah, so can you recall the excitement, that part of going into a promotion race and
Oh, yes.
who your rivals were?
Oh yes, Sunshine City were a very close unit. They were all boys from the West except for Georgie McCusis, myself and Jimmy Paul. They all were local.
Where was Georgie from?
I don't know where he came from.
Okay.
I'm not
Wasn't
sure.
a local boy?
He might. I don't think so. I think they brought him in. But he may have played locally, but
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But they were a great team, and they were hard to break into. And in one game, I played at Yalor, and I made a bad pass, and I got the hairdryer treatment from Ian Pederick. I'll never forget it till the day I die. He really gave it to me, and I had to accept it because I'd made a mistake.
He was old fire and brimstone.
Oh, was he ever?
Yeah.
He was a good coach.
Oh, absolutely.
Ian was a good coach. And anyway, so I didn't manage to get a regular place in the team, But that's okay. And on the last day, we were playing Western Suburbs to win the league, and I was on the bench, and I said, Ian, look, the young boys are going to win the league. Can you let me play for half a game? He said, oh, I don't know. I said, please, can I just help them out? So I played in the half, and we were still struggling. So I asked if I could play a bit more, and they took me off, I think, during the second half. And I thought, I'll be all right here. The boys are going to win this game. And it was a tight game, but we were on top, and it looked easy. And as we got into the second half, the wheels started to fall off. And not being a coach, I couldn't figure it out, but we were just losing the midfield. Now you've got guys like Wilfie Lang, Bobby Pocock, and Frankie Muscles in there. They were really, really good players. And I saw Ian getting more and more agitated, and I said, I hope he's not going to put me on for this last half hour. I said, if anything happens in this game, I don't know what I'm going to do. And he says, get stripped. So I just had to get stripped. I didn't say anything. And he said to me, I want you to go in the middle of that midfield, and I want you to stop every ball that comes through. You stop everything. Leave Willie and Frankie to do the work. You just make sure that anything that comes through there, you stop it, so that we don't lose this game. And I got on there, and that's what I did. And at the end of the game, we went in, and Billy Johnson took a piece of one of our players because he felt he'd cost us the game. And the Altona City manager came in to congratulate us. He was our opponent, and he said, "This is like a morgue. What's going on in here?" And we were just all upset with what had happened. But when we got back to Ian Petherick's place that night, boy, did we let it rip. We really, really did. We had such a night there. I'll never forget it till the day I die. It was wonderful.
Yeah. Promotion races, huh?
Yeah. In that great Sunshine City era, there was that probably early 70s through to maybe 78-ish when
Yes.
Tommy Cummings went through.
That's right.
There's a group of boys who I know still get together.
Oh yeah, I'm
and
sure
they're still as tight today as they probably were then, and it's
I-
amazing.
I wouldn't be surprised, John.
Yeah, that's amazing. And it's a special period for you to have gone through, especially in that promotion year, because I think it still stands out as one of the club's most important years.
It was, and
Yeah.
boys like Big Butch Kokoska and Kaz Petrowski and Jimmy McRoberts and Mickey Bargan, all
Well,
wonderful.
Having
players.
spoke to Ian Petherick
And Mickey.
no, get going.
Oh, sorry, and Mickey, the fullback, great players.
Yeah, Mickey Dixie.
Mickey Dixie.
Yeah. And Ian Petherick said that his two favourite players of all time were Wilfie Lang and Teddy Smith. So that's
I didn't play with Teddy, but I'm not surprised.
yeah.
Talking about quality players, you would have seen Robbie Dunn and Jakov.
Oh, what can I say? Going to Preston was the experience of my life.
This is in the old NSL now.
Robbie Dunn was such a great player. Robbie Dunn and Ian Dobson were a magical combination because they complemented each other perfectly. Zarko Jakov is quite simply one of the best players I've ever seen. There's no other word to explain it. He was a gentleman. And I said, when I went to the club, I said, why are you trying to get rid of this man? And it was the politics of the club, and I was told it was irreparable. He had to go, and I couldn't do much about that. But
So something that had happened between him and the club.
I think there was just a distrust, and I found him to be a perfect gentleman.
So one of the greatest players that we've ever had come to this country, they were looking to offload.
Oh yes, there was no way he was going to be kept, and I still don't understand it. I still don't. He was a wonderful, wonderful player, and as far as I was concerned, he was an absolute gentleman, and I wish I'd had the chance to work with him a bit more. But Robbie Dunn, Ian Dobson, great leader, and you had personalities like Graham Hayes there, Gary Cole, Gordon Fovell, a really hard midfielder, the silky skills of Zoran Ilioski, Con Opasinas, Graham Hayes, a fabulous player in defence or attack, Cole and Smith. I mean, I signed Steve Smith and Warren Spink. We had Sean Lane and Gary and Warren and Steve, and it settled eventually that Gary and Steve were going to be the central strikers, and Warren decided to leave, and I can't blame him because Warren was a great striker.
Yeah.
I just couldn't fit them all in, and he was the youngster of them all. But what a great team. They were wonderful, and the way we lost the finals that year was heartbreaking because we were the better team in both finals. And we lost both games in the last minutes of the game. We'd been leading 1-0 in both of them. We should have scored more goals. In fact, Marshall Soper said when we were in the Cup in Sydney against St George
At Barton Stadium?
Pardon?
Was it at Barton Park?
Yes, it was, I think. And Martin Soper said to Robbie Dunn as he come off, how we won that game, I'll never know.
I think we had Graham Hayes and we've had Georgie Campbell here,
yes.
and I think Graham specifically spoke about that game, and he's still at a loss to understand how that game was lost.
It was unbelievable. We just didn't deserve to lose it.
Yeah. Now, you had some interesting times off the park by the sounds of things, more than one at Preston, but there was a famous story there where Cole and Hayes and yourself were all involved, and do you want to go into that and let us know
yes,
the background?
I'd be very happy
Yeah.
to. Gary and Graham asked the club for an increase in salary. Now, Gary was getting to that stage where he was getting closer and closer to the end, still a great player. And I carried that forward for them, and the club said to me, we're not doing that, and we can't give them more. And I tried to be an intermediary between them, but there was some other things going on. There was obviously an undercurrent there, and there were some other things going on that I still don't fully understand. But one day I went in, and John Braniff called me in, and he said, we're letting Graham Hayes and Gary Cole go. And I said, John, that's the biggest mistake we'll ever make. I said, they are players we need. He says, Bill, they're going. I says, I can't agree. He says, Bill, you've got a choice. And I get on great with John Braniff. He says, you've got a choice. Either they go or they go and you go. So at that stage,
It wasn't much of a choice.
I don't know if I made the right decision, but I was a fighter, and I stayed. And he said, I'm going to tell them. I said, you're not going to tell them. I'm going to tell them. And I went into the dressing room, called them in, and told them, and they couldn't believe it. And I said, my hands are tied. I told them what happened and what was said. And Gary has turned to me. He says, Willie, he says, you know you're next, don't you? I said, yes, I do, but I'm not going to make it easy for them. I said, I've done this job for 2 years, and I'm going to fight it. And we almost got through it, but it got me in the end, and that was it.
You know, they say in football and in life, you lose more often than you win. Yeah?
Oh, yes. If I can just make a comment
yeah.
on that, George, because I was talking to George earlier.
Yeah.
I think everybody out there that wants to be part of this game needs to realise something. You're going to have to sacrifice for this game, and you're going to have to give and give and give and give more than you'll ever give it in anything else in your life. And the minute you try to take from it, it will discard you. That's what we have to realise. The game is always in control, and we are the workers for it. And if we think we're bigger than it, if we're going to get more out of it than we put in, it's not going to happen.
Well, with that in mind, let's talk about some of the things that you didn't get that you worked hard enough to deserve to win. And that is a Doherty Cup.
Oh.
You tried so often.
To be honest, I don't know how it happened, but to lose for Frampton City, we were leading 1-0 with 2 minutes to go. The ribbons were 1 minute to go. The ribbons were on the cup. John Garner was leading Croatia. The game was over. A long ball got played, and Tony Young, who's our best player, it was coming to him. Tommy Cummings was about 10 metres away from him and had stopped. And Tony, the ball was coming right to him. He could have stopped it quite easily, but he had this habit of doing a little shimmy and going, so he did a shimmy forward and went to go backwards and slipped. Tommy Cummings got to the ball just ahead of him. Tony had tried to catch him. Tommy squared it, and a young boy who'd been on the park no more than 10 minutes, and I don't think he played a lot of games for Croatia, scored. And he scored the winning goal in extra time. And we had absolutely dominated the game, and that was the first of them. Then I lost 2 with Preston. I lost 1 with Box Hill. I lost 1 with Altona Gate that I'd like to mention again, and 1 with George Cross. And I lost them all. And the one against Hellas, Altona Gate,
Yeah.
we had a breakfast before the game, and I met Ferenc Puskas, and we were actually asked to give speeches. And again, just with Martin Peters, there's no way I was going to go up there and try to come across this coaching thing. And I just didn't think it was appropriate. And what I did, I told the story of Real Madrid beating Eintracht at Glasgow, and beating Glasgow Rangers in the semi-final, and also then beating Eintracht, and said it was just such a wonderful thing to have Ferenc Puskas there,
A superstar.
a superstar. And then I said we were going to be the underdogs, but we were going out to win the game. And we had a little chat and a shake of hands. And I just feel grateful that I got the opportunity to do that. And we did lose the game 2-1, but we were 1-0, but we were right in it, and we actually hit the post before they scored. And it was a tight game, and I was very proud of the Altona Gate boys that day.
You failed to win the National Cup final,
And that was a tragedy.
the Southern Division Championship, when you clearly had the better team on both occasions.
That's right. It was again in the Southern Division Championship with 2 minutes to go. We were leading 1-0, and we had far the better of the game.
And the opposition was?
The opposition was Juventus.
Yeah.
And the ball got played out on the left. Graham Hayes made a great slide tackle, and the referee gave a free kick. The ball came in and somehow it evaded a few players, but it come up off the ground and hit Mickey Peterson in the arm. The referee was 10 metres away, and he didn't give the free kick, and Peterson scored. The ball got taken from a kick-off. One of our players made a miss-hit, and Robbie Cullen picked the ball up, and we were down 2-1.
Tiger.
All within 2 minutes to go, and it was heartbreaking. I still live every minute of those those finals, because we were magnificent, and we still managed to lose.
Your women's under-16 side dominated the game in the final of the championships, and you lost to a fluke goal. Take us back.
We hit the post, we hit the bar, we should have scored 4 or 5 goals. A ball, Louisa Bisbee was our full-back, and she was about 25 metres out as the ball came down, and she tried to make a big clearance. If she'd done anything else, it wouldn't have been a problem. It hit one of their players 25, 30 metres out. It looked up in the air and came down just under the bar, and our young goalkeeper she was tall enough, but she wasn't experienced enough to put it over the bar, and they won the game 1-0. And it was another tragedy.
Freak goal.
As a coach, how do you bring your players back to the next contest?
You just have to try to get over it and let them know that they were great, and the girls were inconsolable. The thing about girls in the game is they give their heart and soul. They give everything they've got, and you have to be aware of that when you work with them. They want you to be tough, but sometimes if you get a bit too tough, it can affect them. So you just have to walk a line with them. But I've got a great deal of admiration for the girls. I was telling George earlier that when I took the women's team, I'd been down to see a game of the women's team, and a player I had played with, I won't mention his name, came up to me and said, "Well, look at you now, eh?" He said, "You've played National League coach, and now you're coaching women's soccer." And I didn't tell him, but I should have told him that Paul Wade came down with Janine McPhee to my school the day before Paul went to Korea for the Olympics to do a coaching session. Gary Cole, Alan Davison, Paul Trimboli, John Garner, and Lenny McHenry all gave their time to support the women's team in their quest for the championship. They asked for nothing, and they gave it all. And we won that championship with Debbie Nichols scoring a great goal after 3 minutes. And it's something I'll never forget, because we had finally broken the back of it.
What do you make of this wonderful surge of excitement and expectation being created by our wonderful young Matildas under Alan Stajic?
I think it's wonderful. I just think it's great that the girls are getting recognition and that they're getting paid for doing what they're doing. And I think that's absolutely wonderful.
And young Samantha Kerr, do you think she's
Oh,
making a name for herself?
I think she is, and I think she's a fabulous player. And she deserves all the credit she's getting.
Did we have players who played similar styles of game at that time? Or are we seeing a maturation, a real growing
No,
in the women's game?
we did have great players, but they weren't as skillful as they are now. I had a great under-16 player in Sarah Poyser. She was a great leader and captain. And again, in the under-19s, when I took them to the championship, we never lost a game. We were the only team that never lost a game, but the last 2 games we played, we lost a goal in the last 2 minutes to draw the games. But I had a couple of great players there, Belinda Pacella, and they were just wonderful players, but they weren't as skillful as the girls are now. But that's been building for a long time, and it's taken people like Debbie Nichol and Teresa Dees who've put their heart and soul into this, and all the other players like them, Denise Wright and all of those girls, they deserve credit for what's happened. The thing about the girls, again, if I can mention something I said to George, what I felt I had to do, make them understand their value. I asked Teresa and Sean if we could take the girls out to dinner one night, and we went up to an English fish and chip shop. And as we're sitting there, had a great time. I was sitting with Teresa and Sean. Sean said, well, I'd better go and collect the money. I says, what? He says, I'd better go and collect the money. I said, what do you mean? He said, I'll collect the money from the girls to pay for the dinner. I says, we invited them out. I said, you can't ask them to pay. He says, well, who's going to pay? I said, you're going to pay. He said, Bill, we don't have any money, because I wasn't getting paid. I said, they're not paying. He said, well, I can't pay. I said, well, I'll pay. And I'm not saying that to big know myself. I wanted the girls to realise that there was value in them. And I paid. And it was the best thing I ever did, because I wanted them to know that they didn't have to pay that night. And that's the sort of thing that they do. The girls would do it. They didn't even think twice. They would have paid the money, and they would have done more than the boys would have created ruckus. They'd have been an uproar. But the girls didn't. They just wanted to win.
Before we finish, Jim McLean, a name that you really, really have admired.
And a guy that I can't wait to get in here, by the way.
Will we get a chance to get him in, do you think?
I will get money.
I think
Tell us
so.
about Jim McLean. Tell us about
Jimmy was a great player. He was a player in the John Anderson mould and the Frank Michik mould. When I took him on a coaching course and I was trying to teach him about this thing about making third man runs and making forward play, Jimmy went in and played that sort of game. And I could see him doing it he was clocking up in the coaching what he was going, and he was seeing how to make it work. And I pulled him aside after and said, Jimmy, you've got the makings of a great coach here. And he has never realised that. And I think it's a shame, because Jimmy would have been a great coach. Somehow he never got picked up. And on that same note, I'd like to make one comment. How Ian Dobson never managed to get into the National League again as a coach is beyond me. His leadership skills, his record as a coach, he should have been picked up. And that's something that the Australian
Australian games
Federation
are
needs to think
at a
about.
loss.
The games
for
are at a
them,
loss
yeah.
when you don't have people like that getting coaching jobs. He was a wonderful coach. His record tells you that. We seem to want to package everything in one way, and I don't think that's right.
There's one guy we're going to have here in a couple of weeks' time that very few defenders could package. His name was Charlie Egan.
Oh, Charlie was a great.
Tell us about those third man runs.
Well, you see, what Lenny McKendry would do with Gary Cole or Charlie or Dougie Brown, he'd make sure there was always a striker to receive the ball at feet, and he would make midfielders make runs in. And I could never quite work out, because the ball would go to the striker and the midfielder would run. And Jimmy Campbell used to always find space in the box, and we tried to work against it. And I won't go into detail here because there's too much. I had a good chat with Lenny. I said, how do you do it? And he said to me, Willie, you've got to believe. And I think I now understand what he meant. I can't explain it here, it would take too long, about how those runs get made and how that striker can help make those runs happen. It's not by accident.
No,
It
it's by
happens
feel and instinct.
By feel and instinct and intuitive play.
Well, it's
And-
not by accident that Jimmy Campbell is one of the highest scoring players in the history of the game here,
And he's a
he was a
midfielder.
midfielder,
Yeah.
right? So it's just, again, the proof's in the pudding there,
Oh,
with
yes.
the amount of goals he scored from coming from deep.
Mm.
And hopefully we'll get him on here one day and he'll tell us all about it. But again, that talent's going to waste, because wouldn't it be great if we could get him somewhere
Harness
and
him.
teaching some young kids exactly how he made those
It's
runs
just
and
sad.
the value of it.
It's just sad that they're out of the game. Johnny Eisendorf, all these people would be great coaches. Have I got time to mention something that happened at
I
Preston?
certainly have.
Yes, certainly.
Um,
But before you do that, hold on to it for a moment,
Mhm.
because we have one small obligation, and I promise to come back. This is The Pioneers with Bill Murray.
Mark's up.
You're with the Georges, you're on the Pioneers, and we're with our special guest Bill Murray. Bill, before we went to the ad, you were just going to tell us a little bit of a story there.
In my last season, in my second last season with Preston, the second season with Preston, Sean Lane at the end, towards the end of the season, it was obviously he was going to go. He didn't want to play for us anymore, and his performances had dropped. And I didn't like leaving him out, because I liked Sean as a player, but I dropped him with about 6 games to go. And he took it, and we went out and did really well. I think we drew with Croatia, and young George Slivkas come on and did a great job. The next week I left him out again, and I just remember when everyone had left, Sean was sitting on the bench with his head in his hands. It was just him and I said to him, Sean, you've got to go out there and show us what you can do. All I wanted to do was go up and give him a hug, but I couldn't. I had to let him sort it out, and I left him out completely. He wasn't on the bench. He was in the Australian squad, and I'd left him out for 2 games. The week after, I brought him back, and he was playing well. And we had to play JUST on the day they were going to win the championship. They had Dragos Sakalarik as their coach. He was a really good coach, and they were winning. We were playing them at JUST's ground. If they won, they'd won the championship. And I said to Sean, I want to give you a job. I want you to go on there and mark their main midfielder, a young Stozic, the boy who'd come from Yugoslavia. A bit fast for Sean. I gave him some cover. I said, I don't want you to mark him out of the game. I want you to play him out of the game. And we went out in the park. Graham Hayes scored after 23 minutes and had to come off. Stevie Smith didn't play. Ian Dobson didn't play. And we beat JUST 4-1 on their own ground that day. We were absolutely magnificent. The man of the match was Sean Lane. And I found out now that he's just becoming a coach. And I had a talk with him at the Preston night a few months back. And he's impressed me so much. I think we're going to hear a lot more about him. He's a bit late to come to coaching, but I think he's got all the ideas.
Late bloomer. Yeah. We look forward to it.
And speaking of great coaches, people who've made a tremendous impact on the game, Sir Alex Ferguson.
Yes, I knew Archie Knox at college, and when I was going over to Britain in 1990, I phoned Manchester United and said, can I talk to Archie Knox? And he said, yeah. So he got him on the phone. And I said, Archie, it's Bill Murray. He says, Bill, I says, Archie, do you remember where you were when Scotland played Italy in the World Cup in 1965 qualifier in Glasgow when Ronnie Yates scored the winner? He says, yep. I said, remember when Ronnie Yates scored the winner, you jumped up in class and hugged someone? He said, yep. I said, that's me. He says, Bill! He says, look, get up to Manchester. So I went up to the ground, the cliffs, and I met him at the ground. He said, just watch the game and then come back into the dressing room. So he got me in the dressing room, and I was in the canteen with Jimmy Nicholl and all the coaches, and all the players were coming in. And Archie came in, and Alex Ferguson had his hand round Danny Walker, I think it was, arm round him, consoling him. And we had lunch there, and he said, now get back to the ground. So I went down, and there was thousands of people there, thousands. I could see my wife, and I was just standing there, and I heard, Bill. And it was Archie. He says, come here. He says, what's the problem? I said, I don't think my wife's coming. He said, just come with me. And he went up to Sir Alec and said, Alec, can we take Bill back to the ground? His wife's not here. He says, yeah. He says, jump in the back of the Jag. And there's thousands of people there, and I'm getting into the back of the Jag, and they're all saying, who's that? And I've listened to Archie and Alex Ferguson talk about a transfer for a Russian defender costing £5 million at the time. And as I went back, I went up to the main stand at the top, and the actual seats at the window cost £10,000 at that time. And he took me around the corner and says, Bill, I'd like you to meet someone. He says, Sir Matt, can you say hello to my friend from Australia? And I met Sir Matt Busby, and he gave me his time. I couldn't talk. I said hello. I said I was from Australia, and I coached there.
Especially poignant right now, this year, the 60th year of the 58 disaster,
yes,
when they lost all those players.
That's right.
The Munich year.
And he was
a tragedy.
That's right, and he was a perfect gentleman, George. And I took a couple of minutes. I said, Matt, I don't think I can say any more. I thank you for your time, and I'm really grateful. And I left it at that, and I went back and saw the offices and got taken down to the laundry room where all the videos were made. Brian Kidd was the manager of the video room.
Fantastic.
And I had a wonderful time there.
And on that note,
a great time.
We want to thank you for coming in and spending some time with us. It's never enough time with the people we have here, and clearly we could do this all night. We may continue to do it off air, but it's been a pleasure listening and talking to you, Bill. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, George and George, for
absolutely
inviting
great.
me on.
Fantastic.
I really appreciate it.
Another one of our pioneers we can add to the list of champions.
Growing list, and we'll be here next week with young Greg Blake.
Oh, the one and only.
The one and only Greg Blake.
Have a great night. This is FNR, and you've been listening to the Pioneers.
Good night.
I hope I've done a job for you guys.
Well done.
Thank you.
Sensational.
I'm really glad.
Great work.
FNR, Football Nation Radio.
Sirianos, no call! Score!
Salamini for Cole. Cole on the run. Shoots. 2-0.
Lazanowski with the free kick. Launches a rocket! Trimboli, what vision! Blasts. Yes! That's it!
Vujovic.
Here's Bozanic. They haven't! They might have won it!
The Pioneers with George Donikian and George Kotzanis on FNR, Football Nation Radio.